You know, usually when we talk about a medical diagnosis, there is this underlying expectation of just total precision, you
Right.
know?
Oh, yeah. Like it's purely engineering.
Exactly. You fall, you break your arm, the x-ray shows that stark, jagged white line against the black background, and the doctor just points at it and says, you know, there it is. There's the problem.
It's completely binary. I mean, the bone is broken or the bone is intact. There's no in between.
Right. And there is something deeply comforting about that, isn't there? We love when things are visible, when they can be neatly categorized and immediately addressed with a cast or a splint.
For sure.
But then you step out of the clinic and into the world of human behavior. You start looking at personal growth, emotional resilience, or spiritual development, and suddenly that beautiful, precise X-ray machine is completely useless.
Because human transformation doesn't leave a jagged white line on a scan.
Exactly. We are
Yeah.
forced to look at a landscape of the human heart that is honestly incredibly murky.
It is. It's abstract, it's messy, and the mechanics of how we actually change our fundamental nature are fiercely debated.
Which makes the source material we are diving into today so compelling. We are looking at a transcript from a recent religious sermon.
Right, a talk that attempts to take these ancient, historically heavy concepts of spiritual growth and repentance
Yeah.
and completely reframes them.
Yeah, the speaker maps these ancient ideas onto highly relatable modern technological analogies.
Before we get into the architecture of those analogies, though, I do want to establish a clear baseline with you, the listener.
Always important.
Right. Because this source text is a religious sermon, it inherently contains explicit theology. And our mission in this deep dive is absolutely not to endorse, validate, or invalidate the specific religious viewpoints presented.
We are impartially reporting on the content.
Exactly. We just want to explore the fascinating psychological and motivational frameworks the speaker uses. The way this text uses metaphor provides an amazing psychological lens on how human beings process guilt, navigate behavioral change, and build resilient connections.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because the speaker starts with this brilliantly disarming, universally relatable anecdote about the realities of human attention.
Oh, the Sunday morning scenario.
Yes, they describe the experience of sitting in a pew on a Sunday morning. You know, you are there, you are genuinely trying to engage in high-minded spiritual contemplation, and suddenly your brain just starts whispering, hey, remember that leftover pizza in the fridge?
Like, we should really warm that up as soon as we get home.
Right? Or the scenario where the kid in the row next to you drops a heavy plastic toy on the wooden floor, and the speaker jokes that your brain immediately wonders, like, was that echoing noise some kind of profound revelation?
It's funny, but it serves a very specific rhetorical purpose right out of the gate.
It totally normalizes the struggle.
Yes. By highlighting the collision between our highest aspirations and our easily distracted biology, the speaker strips away the pretense that spiritual growth is this serene, uninterrupted upward trajectory.
Which sets up the core thesis of the entire text. It's a massive paradigm shift in how we view the concept of repentance.
How so?
Well, historically, a lot of people conceptualize repentance as this heavy, miserable guilt list. It is an accounting of every single time you chose the metaphorical pizza over enlightenment.
Right, the forensic accounting of failure.
Exactly. But the overarching theme of this text is moving away from that and instead viewing this process as a dramatic, holistic system upgrade for your life.
The linguistic shift from guilt list to system upgrade is psychologically vital here, because a guilt list is inherently backward-looking.
It forces your brain to dwell in the past.
And that often triggers a shame response that actually paralyzes future action. A system upgrade, on the other hand, is forward-looking. It implies that the current operating system simply lacks the capacity for the new software you want to run.
So it removes the moral panic and replaces it with a practical need for enhancement. And, well, the very first requirement for a system upgrade is a stable connection to the server. The text frames this as finding the baseline signal, or what the speaker calls calibrating a spiritual GPS.
The analogy they use to explain the difficulty of this is fantastic.
It really is. They say that trying to hear spiritual guidance today is like trying to book a table at a very exclusive, quiet restaurant. But you're trying to have that phone conversation while standing in the middle of a chaotic city intersection.
Car horns are blaring, jackhammers are going off.
And your own phone is buzzing with 50 different push notifications while you literally have it pressed to your ear.
It highlights that the environment we live in is not just distracting, it is actively hostile to the task of internal reflection. The noise isn't an accident of modern life, it is the defining feature of it.
Reading that section, I couldn't help but picture my own version of this struggle. Imagine trying to perfectly tune one of those old, delicate analog radios.
Oh, the ones with the physical weighted dial?
Yes, where you have to roll it millimeter by millimeter to catch the faint broadcast through the static. But you are attempting this delicate tuning while a high-powered blender is running on the counter right next to your head.
You physically cannot accomplish delicate internal work in a chaotic external environment.
Right. And what's fascinating here is the mechanism the speaker proposes to solve this, because it demands deliberate physical action.
They describe the spiritual signal as a faint but crucial GPS ping.
But they are adamant that revelation, or accessing this deep internal guidance, does not happen passively. You can't just sit in the presence of the blender and hope the radio broadcast suddenly gets louder than the motor.
The text argues you have to put on metaphorical noise-canceling headphones. You must actively, ruthlessly carve out silence by turning off the electronic devices and isolating your attention.
But the text doesn't suggest doing this to solve massive existential crises. It suggests doing this to figure out mundane things. The speaker explicitly says to use this focused silence to ask seemingly trivial questions like, which road should I take on my commute today?
Yeah, that threw me at first, too.
Right. If this connection is so vital, why waste it on traffic routing?
Well, think about the neuroplasticity of focus. If you only try to tune that delicate analog radio during a Category 5 hurricane, you will fail, because you literally don't know how the dial behaves.
Oh, wow. Okay, that makes sense.
By actively carving out silence to seek guidance on small, low-stakes, everyday decisions, you are practicing the habit of tuning out the blender. You are training the reticular activating system in your brain to recognize what that faint internal signal even sounds like.
So you're calibrating the instrument before you actually have to navigate the wilderness.
Precisely. You are building the psychological pathways for focus so that when a genuine crisis hits, the pathway to that quiet internal space is already paved and familiar.
But, simply hearing the internal GPS clearly doesn't actually get you to the destination, because once the static clears and you can hear the directions, you inevitably look down at the vehicle you were driving.
Meaning your life, your daily habits, your character.
Yeah. And you realize the machine itself is fundamentally incapable of making the journey. The signal just makes you painfully aware that your engine is sputtering.
The clarity of the signal exposes the inadequacy of the vessel, which, of course, forces a critical choice about maintenance.
And this is where the speaker completely redefines the mechanics of change. The text explicitly critiques what it calls miserable behavior modification.
They compare this approach to trying to fix a rusted-out, broken-down old car using nothing but duct tape and super glue.
Right. You wrap the hoses, you patch the radiator, and sure, the car might limp down the road for another few weeks, but fundamentally, the machine is still broken. The failure is inevitable.
So instead of that duct tape approach, the text argues that true repentance is a total engine replacement.
Yes. You hand the entire car over to a master mechanic, identified in this theology as Jesus Christ, for a clean, high-performance engine swap.
It is a total rejection of the superficial white-knuckled fix.
It is, but I have to push back a little here. Isn't it human nature to just want to patch things up quickly rather than tear the whole engine apart? Tearing the whole engine out, admitting that the very core of your vehicle is fundamentally insufficient, is terrifyingly vulnerable.
Oh, without a doubt. We desperately cling to the duct tape because as long as we are the ones applying the tape, we are still in control of the repair. Handing it to a mechanic feels like giving up.
Exactly.
But that vulnerability is exactly the psychological friction the text is targeting. We do cling to the duct tape for the illusion of control, but look at the psychological toll of that control. When your strategy is duct tape, your entire cognitive focus is fixated on the crack in the radiator.
You're just constantly monitoring your own fragility.
Yes. You become defined by your brokenness.
You're just waiting for the tape to peel.
Exactly. And this is the difference between shame and guilt. Guilt says, I made a mistake, my car stalled. Shame says, I am a mistake, my car is garbage.
Wow.
The duct tape mentality keeps you trapped in the freeze response of shame. By arguing for an engine swap, the speaker shifts the focus entirely. You are no longer agonizing over your failure. You are focusing on the master mechanic's infinite capacity to provide a new, flawless engine.
So it completely bypasses the shame cycle.
It rewires the emotional outcome. Instead of the anxiety of waiting for your makeshift repairs to fail, you experience the joy and peace of operating a machine you didn't have to build from scratch. It changes the paradigm from internal accounting to external reliance.
But a high-performance engine fundamentally alters the demands of the vehicle.
Right.
I mean, a massive new engine burns through fuel infinitely faster than a sputtering old one.
It absolutely does.
If you try to run that new spiritual engine on your own limited willpower, especially when you start taking that vehicle out to serve other people, you are going to stall out immediately.
Which introduces the next logical requirement, a sustainable power supply.
The source text offers a stark warning about attempting to serve others, whether that's volunteering in your community, caring for your family, or fulfilling a religious duty, using only your own isolated power.
They compare our personal individual capacity to a small, dry cell battery, like a single AA battery.
Yeah, and the text bluntly states that if you try to fulfill your life's duties running strictly on that tiny battery, you will inevitably burn out in a matter of weeks.
And burnout isn't just a buzzword here. It is a very real epidemic. It's largely driven by the hyper-individualistic mindset that we have to generate all our own energy.
The alternative the text presents is this vivid imagery of tapping into a massive wireless charger. The speaker describes this charger as the underlying power source that runs the entire church and heaven itself.
You aren't meant to be the battery at all.
Right. You are designed to be a device sitting securely on the charging pad, drawing from a limitless external grid.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the psychological mechanism at play in this analogy is cognitive reappraisal, specifically regarding how we handle overwhelming responsibility.
Because when faced with a task that completely exceeds our personal capacity, our default instinct is to pray for a lighter load.
Exactly. The text phrases it as praying for what you can do. You look at the mountain and you ask the universe to shrink the mountain so it matches the low voltage of your dry cell battery.
It's totally a mindset of scarcity. We assume the resources are fixed, so the demand has to decrease.
Precisely. But the text argues for an aggressive pivot to an abundance mindset. It instructs that you must never pray for the task to be reduced to fit your limits.
You pray for the Lord's power to fulfill the duty.
Yes. You are supposed to ask for the current of that wireless charger to flow through you. You don't ask for a smaller mountain. You ask for the external capacity to climb it. You're expanding your capacity to meet the challenge rather than shrinking your life to accommodate your weakness.
That reframing completely changes how you view a difficult day. The difficulty isn't a threat to your battery, it's just a prompt to ensure you're on the charging pad.
Exactly.
But if you have this new engine and you are drawing limitless power from this wireless charger, what is all that energy actually supposed to produce? Like, what is the tangible output of this system upgrade?
Because power without direction is just heat. It has to serve a function.
Right. And the text anticipates this by addressing the danger of routine. The speaker offers a very sharp critique of how we often treat our habits, specifically religious rituals like attending church or going to a temple. They warn against treating these actions as a mere attendance check.
Like you were just punching a spiritual time card to prove to management that you showed up.
Yes.
We rely on the attendance check heuristic in almost every area of life. We go to the gym and scroll on our phones. We sit down for dinner with our spouses and stare at the television. The physical proximity replaces the actual engagement.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. To combat this, the speaker introduces the metaphor of a mirror. They argue that true, purposeful worship is the active, deliberate process of polishing a mirror. And I was struck by how insidious routine is here.
Oh, it really is.
It is so easy to let the physical habit completely blind you to the purpose of the action. You can get so used to the physical motion of swiping the cloth over the glass every single Sunday that you entirely stop looking at the reflection. You forget why you were wiping the glass in the first place.
The motion becomes a defense mechanism against actual transformation. To understand the depth of the speaker's mirror metaphor, we really have to look at what is actually clouding the glass.
Right.
The text describes the buildup as worldly dirt and selfish dust.
Selfish dust. That is such a great phrase.
It is the daily accumulation of ego, petty grievances, status anxiety, and self-preservation. What the text is arguing is that time spent in deliberate worship isn't just performing a ritual for the sake of historical tradition. It is highly functional.
It is the intentional cognitive and spiritual act of wiping away the cognitive bias of that selfish dust.
And crucially, the goal isn't to have a shiny mirror for your own vanity.
You don't polish it just to admire yourself.
No. The goal is to cultivate and reflect very specific traits. The text explicitly lists humility, love, and charity. The mirror must be clean so that the light of those external traits can strike you and immediately bounce off to illuminate the people standing around you.
So the output of the wireless charger is true, tangible change in the lives of others.
If your mirror is covered in the thick dust of your own ego, that incredible light hits you and is simply absorbed. The energy stops with you.
The power is meant to flow through you, not to you. And that continuous reflection of light fundamentally alters how you interact with the people around you, which naturally leads to the ultimate goal of this entire framework, building deep, unbreakable relational bonds.
Because a system upgrade that only isolates you is actually a system failure.
Exactly. So what does this all mean? This is where the text introduces its most striking and frankly unexpected modern analogy. The speaker equates the optimal relationship with God, and by extension with others, to a bank's credit score.
It is a massive conceptual leap to go from ancient theology to modern institutional finance, but it is an incredibly effective way to explain the reciprocal mechanics of trust.
Let's break down the specific terminology the source uses here because it leans on two vital concepts. First, it describes God's infinite love, mercy, and grace, using the term hesed.
Right.
The speaker likens this hesed to an infinite line of credit extended by a bank. It is an endless reserve of grace that is made available to you entirely, regardless of your current behavioral account balance.
It operates as unlimited overdraft protection for the human soul. You cannot bankrupt it.
And then the text defines our required response to that infinite credit line. The way we choose to keep commandments and demonstrate trust in the Lord is called emunah.
And emunah is described not as grand, sweeping gestures, but as the daily, sincere fulfillment of our promises.
It is the act of making your small daily deposits. It is paying the emotional mortgage on time, every time.
When you map those two concepts together, the infinite unearned grace of hesed and the daily faithful action of emunah, they create a powerful, compounding bond of trust.
Your spiritual credit score goes up.
Yes. The bank trusts you with more responsibility, and you, in turn, trust the bank to always have the reserves you need when you inevitably fall short. It completely reframes obedience. It is no longer a fearful subjugation to a dictator. It is a rational, mutually beneficial investment in a relationship.
But what makes this brilliant is that the speaker refuses to leave this as an abstract vertical relationship between a human and the divine. They force this financial model right down to earth, applying it directly to how human families operate. The text explicitly labels the family as our greatest asset.
And in financial terms, an asset isn't just something you possess. An asset is something that holds intrinsic value and is expected to produce future benefit. It requires management and protection.
Right. And to test this asset management, the source provides a very difficult, highly practical, real-world scenario. It advises the listener on what to do when a loved one leaves the faith or chooses a path you fundamentally disagree with.
The text argues that this established bond of trust, this deep understanding of hesed and emunah, dictates a very specific response.
You are instructed to love the person and not the sin. You must maintain the relationship as the absolute overriding priority, ensuring that you remain a safe place to return. You do not close their account just because they missed a payment or went into default.
Which is the ultimate practical manifestation of having a polished mirror. If you have been living on the charging pad, receiving that infinite line of credit that has said, you are morally and logically obligated to extend that exact same line of credit to the people around you.
You have to become the bank for them.
You become the safe harbor. You refuse to cut off their relational funding when they struggle.
That is an incredibly heavy burden, though. Becoming a relational bank that never forecloses, even when someone defaults on you emotionally, even when they cause you pain, requires an immense amount of personal resilience.
Yeah.
It sounds like a recipe for being taken advantage of if you're trying to do it on your own.
Which is exactly why the text layered the tools in this specific order. You cannot be the bank for a struggling family member if you are running on a tiny, dry cell battery. You will burn out into resentment.
And resentment is just compound interest working in reverse.
Wow, yes. You can only offer an infinite line of relational credit if you've already undergone the engine swap, if you are actively plugged into the massive wireless charger, and if you are diligently wiping the selfish dust off your mirror so you can reflect that external grace outward. The system has to be intact for the trust to survive.
The architecture of the argument really is airtight when you lay it out like that. Every concept fundamentally relies on the previous one.
It really does.
You start in the chaotic noise of the city, deliberately tuning the dial to catch that faint GPS signal. Hearing the signal forces you to admit your duct-taped engine is failing, requiring the terrifying vulnerability of handing the machine over for a total overhaul.
And that massive new engine demands you abandon your dry cell battery and plug into a limitless wireless charger.
Right. The raw power of that charger forces you to relentlessly polish the selfish dust off your mirror. And finally, that clean mirror allows you to reflect Hesed, infinite grace, outward, turning you into an unbreakable relational bank for the people you love.
It's not just a list of behaviors.
No, it is explicitly described by the speaker not as mere bug fixes for life, but as a joyful, continuous cycle of transformation.
It is a remarkable blueprint for moving beyond mere survival and into profound psychological and relational abundance. And as we conclude our analysis of this text, I want to leave you, our listener, with a final thought to mull over as you step back into the noise of your own day. Consider the concept of Hesed, that infinite line of credit. In our modern culture, we are deeply conditioned to view trust and grace as commodities that must be desperately, perfectly earned before they are given. But what if you inverted that model? If you were to unilaterally offer an infinite line of relational credit to the people in your own life today, assuming the absolute best of them even when they fail, how might that fundamentally alter the way your community or family operates tomorrow? What actually happens when you decide to become the safe place to return?
What happens when you become the bank? It changes everything. Well, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We hope dissecting these frameworks gave you some incredible new lenses to look through as you navigate your own messy human landscape. Keep asking the hard questions, keep polishing that mirror, and we will catch you next time.